Well, good morning. Lynn was saying before most of you arrived, it feels like almost like a new chapter with after Easter, like spring is here after a long winter. So it's sort of just nice to sit here and acknowledge that. Well, I'm really looking forward to being with Miko today. Her title and I think what she's going to be doing is exactly what our organization is trying to live up to, and it talks about how focusing enables carrying forward, even within oppressive contexts. And I can't even pretend to know what all that means, but trying to find a new way forward with focusing to create a world of, as she talked about, greater justice, care, and compassion. So I'm really grateful for Miko's presence and to bring this conversation to all of us today.
It's such a delight to have Miko. I woke up this morning feeling like, wow, I'm going to get to hear what Miko was thinking about. And that will be so special. Miko, you have such a special presence, and I'm very curious about how you're putting it all together. Miko is a member of our community empowerment group, and also the new group of focusing millennial helpers. And I just want to say, in terms of introducing you, Miko, that you have such a special presence in the community empowerment group. There's something about how Miko has this thoughtful, connected way of bringing herself into the delicate subjects and situations. And she had given us a metaphor that we use now in the group about being on your fawn legs, the baby deer, and just sort of finding your way there. And we've all taken up that metaphor, and issues like social justice, issues like movement making, they're very delicate issues, and we're all in a way on our spindly legs trying to find our footing. So welcome, Miko.
Thank you so much, Lynn. So I'm actually going to share my screen with you all here. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lynn, so much for that introduction, and thank you all for having me. My name is Miko, and I use she, her pronouns. I live on occupied Nisenan land in Sacramento, California. And I am very, very excited to be here with you all. This is my first time attending Help for Helpers. It's pretty early for me, but I am happy to have the opportunity to share this reflection with you all and to be in community with you all. I had mentioned to Lynn, as well as others, that I am interested in focusing oriented movement building. And by movement building here, that is referring to social change movements. So I have a background in mental health and wellness work and nonprofit work and in social justice and equity work. And I first found out about focusing. Actually, I'm pretty new to focusing. I first found out about focusing in the fall of 2019. And ever since have been trying to think through how I might be able to incorporate that into the spaces that I'm in and into these social change movement spaces and building movements and building cultures and communities of practice that incorporate focusing kind of as like a part of the culture there. So in this reflection, I'll be sharing the different pieces I've been holding, and I'm trying to kind of put together in a cohesive way. I was expressing to Lynn how much I appreciated the invitation to share this reflection, because it gave me an opportunity to try to put all the pieces together. So this is an evolving kind of conceptualization here. And as I mentioned, I'm relatively new to focusing, so it will reflect my understanding of what I know and understand of focusing. So I'm excited to be in conversation with you all for questions and feedback, and for this understanding to emerge and evolve with us all together. And I'm aware that for those of us in this space, or for those who may be viewing this recording after the fact, that people have, varying levels of experience with and knowledge of focusing. So I will try to keep that in mind as I am sharing this reflection here. So to start, I kind of wanted to begin here by grounding in Jean's philosophy. So, Jean, and I'm going to speak in a way that's assuming maybe someone doesn't have a knowledge of Jean and focusing. So I'm aware that some folks here likely do, but so to ground in Jean's philosophy and kind of build up to the idea of focusing oriented movement building, Jean was a student of philosophy who was interested in the philosophy of the implicit, right? So consciousness as a continuous process of conceptualizing implicit understanding, interested in this idea and how we form concepts from these nonverbal preconceptual feelings. So thinking of maybe those moments where you are trying to recall a word and you're like, what is that word that I'm thinking of? And you have this implicit understanding of what this word or this idea or this concept is, this nonverbal implicit understanding kind of experience as this felt sensation inwardly that kind of precedes your understanding of or your awareness of what the exact word is. But then once people may suggest words, they're like, is it this, is it that? Or you may think, is it this or is it that? But then when you come upon the word that is kind of a match for that internal feeling, that's when there's that alignment. So connecting with that felt sense there. So that is the philosophy of the implicit that Jean was interested in. And wanting to explore that a little bit further within human experience, Jean began working with Carl Rogers, the well-known psychologist, to explore what the philosophy of the implicit looked like within therapeutic settings. So as he kind of evolved that understanding, here's a quote from him from Focusing Oriented Psychotherapy: "Every bit of human experience has a possible further movement implicit in it." So elaborating on that, in his research that he did with Carl Rogers and exploring therapeutic outcomes for clients in therapy, seeing what led to successful outcomes, what that research uncovered was that there are essentially these two therapeutic dead ends. This kind of therapeutic dead end of getting kind of caught up in, I guess, what could be called like the thinking self and thought in that way, and kind of getting stuck there and not being able to move beyond that place. And then this other therapeutic dead end of kind of getting caught up and identifying with the feeling self or the emotional self here and not being able to move beyond that place. So both of these as stuck places, whether it is stuck in thought here or stuck kind of in emotion and feeling here. But what emerged was that there is actually this third way of processing experience that was more generative, kind of leading to this forward movement and being able to move beyond these stuck places. And what he kind of noticed was that in therapy, these clients seem to be interacting with or attending to these nonverbal preconceptual feelings that he came to call these felt senses. And so they were able to get this distance rather than being kind of in this thinking self or in this feeling self here, able to shift into this this different aspect of self that allowed for this kind of attending to these felt senses, these nonverbal preconceptual feelings that when attended to would unfold and reveal implicit understanding that would then unfold and reveal further implicit understanding that moved in the direction of this life forward progression. So kind of going back to that previous quote there, every bit of human experience has a possible further movement implicit in it. So in these two therapeutic dead ends, there isn't that movement there's kind of this stuckness, but from this aspect of this more generative experiential process where one has enough distance to be in relationship with these felt senses, there is that capacity and that ability to move in a more generative way, in a more life forward way. And so what Jean kind of uncovered with in this process is what then gave rise to the focusing steps, realizing that this particular way of experiencing and being with our internal experience is something that could be taught. So I want to read a quote here from from Gene that speaks to this life forward process. So this is from his text, Focusing. Your body always tends in the direction of feeling better. Your body is a complex life-maintaining system. Often we feel so much wrong that we come to accept those bad feelings as the basic state of things, but it is not. The bad feeling is the body knowing and pushing toward what good would be. Every bad feeling is potential energy toward a more right way of being if you give it space to move toward its rightness. You cannot and should not trust any single set of words, any one feeling, any one body message that comes, but you can definitely trust the whole series of steps by which your body moves to resolve and change a wrong state of being. You can trust that even if the words and understanding of a given step are superseded, that step was the right step to come then at that moment and will lead to the right next step from there. And so core to this focusing and the philosophy of this, of the implicit and this understanding of human experiencing is this realization that we are interaction and that interaction takes place at various levels. So intrapersonally, in relation to this internal experiencing, these felt senses, interpersonally in relation to external subjects. So for those who know focusing, you can think kind of like a focusing partnership, and then collectively in relation to culture, systems, practices, processes, et cetera, in ways that we are shaped by these larger systems and conditioned within them and living within them. So when I'm talking about a focusing orientation here in regard to movement building and social change movement and social change movements, I'm talking about an approach to movement building that, and when I say movement building here, that's just a term to refer to the ongoing work of being in movement and organizing people collectively to create social change in the direction of greater care, justice, and compassion. So bringing a focusing orientation into movement building means centering this life forward process, this generative life forward process in interactions, processes, practices, culture, et cetera, and working intentionally to facilitate that process. So I think there is this awareness in daily life and within movements that decisions are being made. There's an effort being made to move forward in some sort of direction. And this focusing orientation involves being very intentional about facilitating this life forward process that we understand through focusing can lead to that kind of generative movement in that way. So this involves an approach that is interactive and relational, recognizing that interaction and relationships are kind of the foundation of our experiencing. It is transformative because it leads to change in that way, kind of speaking to that piece that Jean was talking about, how the steps are superseded, you know, the conditions of what exists here will change and transform. And when we're thinking about movement building, we're specifically trying to transform this wrong state of things into this more right life forward state of things, and adaptive. And what I mean by adaptive here is how the various steps connect. And as we know with focusing, the ways that those steps connect can't always be logically anticipated. You know, you may think that, oh, from here, this is what may come, but that isn't necessarily what may come, right? But when you look at the series of steps together, you see that it does make sense in a kind of adaptive way. So again, this focusing orientation involves an approach that is interactive, relational, transformative, and adaptive. So kind of coming to the questions that were put forward here as a reflective inquiry in relation to focusing oriented movement building. How might focusing be understood as a liberatory process that can enable a sense of carrying forward even within oppressive contexts? So that speaks to what Jean was talking about, how we get used to this bad state or wrong state of things, you know, existing within that wrong state of things, and focusing as this liberatory process that can move us more in the direction of the right state of being, where it feels like there is that sense, or not just feels like, but there is that sense of carrying forward. Can a focusing orientation facilitate an empowered awareness that supports individuals and social change movements in organizing for our collective carrying forward? So the language of empowered awareness is what I use to kind of refer to this state of state of being and experiencing here, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. So can a focusing orientation facilitate an empowered awareness that supports individuals and social change movements in organizing for our collective carrying forward? So the important piece here is that it's not only about the individual carrying forward, but it's also connected to the collective carrying forward, understanding that the collective is a collection of individuals, but also that the individual is connected to these others as a cohesive whole through relationship and through interaction. And then how might the wisdom of our inner unfolding and implicit understanding, intentionally accessed through the focusing steps, help us to foster communities and cultures of greater justice, care, and compassion? So how can we incorporate this focusing orientation in a very intentional way in our communities through cultures and through intentional practices? So these are the kind of reflective inquiries that are kind of being held here within the idea of focusing oriented movement building. So I want to speak a little bit more to this idea of empowered awareness. So this idea of empowered awareness is really the aspect of self-being or awareness from which one is enabled to act in a generative and life-forward direction. So, when we are doing focusing and we have this kind of relationship with our internal experiencing, these nonverbal preconceptual feelings, we are able to attend to them in such a way that they are able to unfold in that life forward direction, and within that life forward direction, because it enables movement, because it enables action in that way, I think of it as empowered, this empowered awareness, this aspect of self from which we are enabled to do or move forward in some type of way, as opposed to the other modes of processing where one is kind of caught up and stuck in the thinking self or caught up and stuck in the feeling self. So focusing oriented movement building is about facilitating empowered awareness in such a way that not only liberates the individual within their own mind and embodied self, but empowers them with a sense of power and freedom that persists even in oppressive conditions and extends to include the empowerment and liberation of others. So, really wanting to highlight the three pieces here, that this empowered awareness at the individual level liberates the individual within their own mind. So they have some type of new understanding or new insight that empowers them in some way, or leads to this new sense of possibility or life forward movement, even if it is just a shift in their understanding. And so that sense of empowerment persists regardless of what the external conditions may be. So this is actually tangential here, but, thinking of like Viktor Frankl, right? So Viktor Frankl kind of being within the conditions of a concentration camp had this connection to meaning of some kind, right? I think I'm trying to remember that quote, something about the meaning being connected to the pursuit of love or the experience of love, right? So even within those oppressive conditions, he was able to connect to that sense of meaning that felt like this kind of new opening of sorts. So that is kind of this sense of empowerment, even within oppressive contexts and conditions, but also a core piece here again, that this extends to the empowerment and liberation of others. So it's not just for individual embodied self. By embodied self here, I mean the individual consciousness within a particular body, but also extending that to the collective as well. So I want to draw on Jean here, and we'll do quite a bit of sharing of his quotes here. And this is from the Political Critique of Awareness. I'm always bringing this up, this particular article, because I think it is the article that really, the writing of his that really sparked this connection for me to focusing to the social justice and equity work that I do in movement building and social change overall. So I'm going to read from Jean here. So we live in a structural political context, and it can help to sense ourselves within it. A political context enables private freeing steps beyond the usual limits. People in so-called minority groups gain a lot of strength from discovering that such subjective difficulties are not their individual traits, but are systematically generated by the experiences the social structure assigns them, Recognizing this, an individual becomes stronger. This well-known strengthening comes from knowing oneself to belong to a politically oppressed group. This effect does not occur if one knows merely that others suffer similar difficulties. The strengthening comes from the political aspect. And let us see how that word works here. So this strengthening comes from, and Jean will talk about this here, but this awareness that we are embedded within and shaped by and conditioned by these larger structures and systems. So an individual may have this sense of shame or guilt about themselves and how and who they are, but in understanding that they've been shaped by these larger structures to maybe operate a certain way or be a certain way, then enables them to have this sense of empowerment, recognizing, oh no, this isn't that there's something wrong with me. It's actually because I've been shaped in this way. And from that, there comes this strengthening that Jean talks about. So continuing to read from Jean here, political oppression has its common origin in structural arrangements of social living, definitions of situations, conditions of work, patterns of love, roles of social and economic structure. It is not just individual fate accidentally shared, therefore it gives one an energy. So even wanting to go back to this piece here, this effect does not occur if one knows merely that others suffer similar difficulties, right? So a person can see that, oh, I'm suffering and this person is also suffering in the same way, and it doesn't lead to that same political strengthening. A core part of what leads to this political strengthening is the recognition and awareness of these larger systems. So that awareness, that understanding, and that kind of learning about those structures and those systems and the history of it is a part of this kind of strengthening as well. So I'll read that last paragraph again. Political oppression has its common origin in structural arrangements of social living, definitions of situations, conditions of work, patterns of love, roles of social and economic structure. It is not just individual fate accidentally shared, therefore it gives one an energy. So continuing on. The person self-denigrating turns into positive energy. The person feels as one of millions who had criticized themselves individually. The shortcomings are recognized as a result of political deprivation. Suddenly, a shy person who has always been interrupted and has no experience in arguing can speak up. The inability to speak well is no obstacle now. The person points to it saying, see, I don't speak well. That's because of how I was trained only to listen. That's my point. We need to extend this political strengthening to everyone. Blacks, women, and gay people also need this strengthening as human individuals, not only as members of a minority. So again, here's that piece of this person who doesn't speak well, right? Who may feel shame around their inability to speak well, but then recognizing, oh no, I don't speak well because of how I've been shaped by these larger systems. So again, thinking about interaction happening interpersonally, and collectively, there is this societal aspect to it, but this could also happen at the familial level, right? I think that comes through in therapeutic settings. I'm a hypnotist, but also have worked as a therapist from a more traditional psychological perspective, right? And so a person understanding how their childhood and their particular families might have shaped them to show up in a certain way, then empowers them to have a different understanding about it, maybe to feel differently about it, right? So having this understanding of that shaping can lead to this strengthening. So continuing to read here, just as the women's movement opposes not men, but certain structural patterns, so I am not opposing people, but structural arrangements. Everyone is trapped in those, nor am I speaking negatively about the present society. Our greater individual capacity and intricacy developed in its relatively great openness, its literacy, wealth, production, communication, and other sophistications, as well as its history of constant evolution. The idea is not to turn against it, to stop loving it, but to sense where it is killing the life in us. Right? So where it is killing the life in us is this where that life forward movement is being inhibited, right? So if the human organism has this life forward process that is inherent to the organism, then the idea here is what's being recognized here as oppression is that there are these aspects of these larger structural patterns in society that in some ways kill that life or inhibit that life forward movement. And so that is why that is where referring to focusing as this liberatory process comes in, because it allows that, that aspect of, as I've heard Lynn say, life seeking life. It allows for that to happen in a generative way rather than kind of getting stuck or being inhibited or hindered. This political awareness is needed for social action, but also for a private experiential process. So this happening at the collective level as well as individual. Continuing to read from Jean, this is the last slide from Jean. You might find how you oppress yourself by identifying and joining old forms. For example, those that say produce, perform, don't upset those in charge, don't ask too much, make no waves, look good, be deserving. And so from the social justice perspective, we would think of this as internalized oppression, right? That is, these are these inner voices that are doing the shaming, that are doing the guilting. So really, once you have an understanding of these structural patterns, you can connect to how you've been, how you've internalized those ideas in internalized oppressive ways. And continuing from Jean, people differ in what they have developed and what is now a freeing step for them. So people have different social positions within society and within these structures and within these systems, but have also been shaped in different ways depending on those settings and their particular environments. And so continue on from Jean, without a political translation, there may not be enough energy to free us from hurt, anger, shame, etc. Their stuckness keeps us in the forms we consciously oppose. We see through these forms, but our bodily capacity is not enough to walk through them. New forms don't just pop up. They are augmentations of old forms. They come from freely sensing the old forms and how they don't fit. Avoiding them from pain is almost like respecting them. Then we don't get past them. So again, an awareness of these structural patterns is crucial here, because within the awareness of those structural patterns, there is then this, connection to, oh, I've been shaped by these. This isn't my own lack or wrongness in a way. And then when there is an awareness of these patterns, you could then sense into how they don't fit, right? So we were talking about that recognition of that sense of internal sense of rightness, and whether this external concept or reality is aligning with that internal sense of rightness that exists as this non-verbal preconceptual feeling. So when we have this understanding, we can then do that checking, right? But not just this checking, but we can also then elaborate on these old forms to lead to new forms that are more supportive of that life forward process and movement. And so this final sentence from Jean here, the political translation helps to bring energy, resilience, some of that new ego strength I spoke of. So then the core question holding all of this here is, what is it that hinders and facilitates generative interaction? And when I say generative interaction here, I'm talking about that life forward process. What hinders and facilitates generative interaction at the interpersonal level, at the collective level, and in focusing oriented movement building, it is about committing to fostering supportive practices and cultures at all levels. So interpersonally, and collectively. So I'm going to give some facilitative examples. So when we're thinking about what facilitates generative interaction at these various levels, so some examples of that might include incorporating language that reflects a focusing orientation. So whether that is the individual using that in their self-talk, or whether that is people in interaction using that kind of language, as opposed to like, how are you, maybe asking what's alive with you, kind of inviting that person to sense into what's there for them, and then creating an opportunity for you to resonate with them, or just this language of I am sensing. And so, incorporating that interpersonally in self-talk and self-interaction, self-relationship, or an interaction. And then as we do that, of course, that then shapes a larger collective culture. Normalizing the pause, right? Which in the pause is where we do that sensing in, and then normalizing that sensing, normalizing that resonating, where a external other, right, resonates with another external subject in that way, and then normalizing these focusing conversations as how we communicate. And then normalizing these invitations for co-holding and sensing. So being in space and inviting others to bring things into the space that we can co-hold and sense into together. And then some other facilitative examples are processes and practices oriented toward emergent and evolving mutual pattern making, right? So if we are centering this life forward process and incorporating this focusing orientation, we would then prioritize processes and practices oriented toward emergent and evolving mutual pattern making, rather than fixed and rigid hierarchical rules and paradigms where it's like this one person says that we do things this way and so that's how we do it, rather than this kind of more equitable, mutual, relational pattern making that emerges there. And so processes and practices here could be, decision making. It could be how we go about doing a meeting, or it could be how we go about doing conflict resolution, or just how we go about interacting or being in conversation, all of that. So I want to give an example of kind of this empowered awareness by looking at the experience and the person of Harriet Tubman. So for those who may or may not be familiar with Harriet Tubman was an abolitionist who lived during the time of 1820 to 1913, who had been born into slavery in the United States. And so she was able to escape enslavement and slavery, but not only did she escape slavery and to freedom, she also came back to help free others. So she came back and helped to free 70 other slaves and was a critical figure on the Underground Railroad, which was a network of secret routes and safe houses that helped people to escape to freedom during the time of historical slavery in the United States. So a core piece is here that she escaped for freedom herself, that she also came back to help others to escape as well. And that it kind of led to this movement of this Underground Railroad where people were kind of organizing collectively together to support that liberatory journey for people. So I wanted to kind of speak to this Harriet Tubman shaping here with this quote. So this is from Harriet Tubman. "I grew up like a neglected weed, ignorant of liberty, having no experience of it. Then I was not happy or contented. Every time I saw a white man, I was afraid of being carried away. I had 2 sisters carried away in a chain gang. One of them left 2 children. We were always uneasy. Now I've been free. I know what a dreadful condition slavery is." So again, this is her shaping, right? So she was had this shaping of like a neglected weed, right? And so I think if we have experience focusing, we can think of the felt sense of that, right? The felt sense of being like a neglected weed. So when she's saying like a neglected weed, that's speaking to a particular felt sense, right? Of the quality of what that feeling of being a neglected weed was, right? So she had this shaping and that was what she knew. And that sense of we were always uneasy, right? So that's kind of going back to what Jean was talking about, that sense of wrong feeling, that we were always uneasy. And so if you're in a focusing partnership with Harriet Tubman as a young child and her speaking to this sense of uneasiness, you can potentially imagine what that might be like and what that might feel like. And now I've been free. I know what a dreadful condition slavery is. So, in her freedom, she has an understanding of the larger structural pattern, the larger system that led to that shaping, right? So growing up like a neglected weed, she could have internalized this understanding, I am a neglected weed. I am, right? So there's something inherent to me. There's something shameful, wrong about me. But no, there is something happened in the in-between where there was this recognition of no, actually this condition of slavery, which is dreadful, is what gave me that experience rather than me being a neglected weed and having that kind of inherent quality. So kind of delving more deeply into that, this is from Harriet Tubman, The Road to Freedom by Catherine Clinton, that speaks to this moment I want to highlight here of coming into empowered awareness. And Araminta is the name that is Harriet Tubman's childhood name. With her owner's death, Araminta faced a series of perplexing questions. What would become of her mother and siblings once they all became the inheritance of the Brodish children? Would her family be sold and scattered to the 4 corners of the South? Where would Araminta end up? Sold away from her family? Sold away from her husband? Tubman, in her early 20s, confronted the possibility of abandoning her parents, her husband, in the Eastern Shore, the only place she had ever called home. So this is a prime moment, right, where we'd be like, well, let's focus. Let's do some focusing around that, right, with these questions. Araminta's sisters had disappeared with a slave coffle, and she felt an intensifying need to leave before she too was swallowed up by the void. So imagining, again, if you were in a focusing partnership with Harriet Tubman and her describing this feeling of being swallowed up by the void, and kind of what unfolds underneath that felt sense, what is kind of revealed there is this need to leave, this intensifying need to leave, experienced by this felt sense of like being swallowed up by a void. And so I don't know that this being swallowed up by the void is Harriet Tubman's language, but it's the language that the author used, maybe sensing into what that might have been like for Harriet. Continuing reading here. Years later, Tubman likened her decision to an epiphany. I had reasoned this out in my mind. There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other, right? So this epiphany can be thought of like a felt shift, right? When you have that felt shift, being with that feeling of being swallowed up by the void, and in being with that, kind of uncovering this life forward movement, this life forward process, being allowed to kind of move toward that rightness and unfold in a generative way, reveals this need to leave, right? And opens up this possibility. There were one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other, right? So her then being empowered and able to act in a way that was life forward for her and generative for her, she could now, with this realization, make the decision to leave and escape to freedom there. So kind of coming into empowered awareness in that way. So the idea here with empowered awareness being kind of core to focusing oriented movement building, happening at the interpersonal level, and the collective level, foundational to empowered awareness is this capacity for generative interaction. And by generative interaction, it is life forward process unfolding in that generative way. And then when that happens, there is understanding and clarity, right? There is healing, care, and liberation. There's transformation and possibility, and then there's ongoing actualization and emergence. So in the case of Harriet Tubman, in this moment of coming into empowered awareness, there's this new understanding and clarity, right? Oh, there's this need to leave. I'm being swallowed up by this void here. And with that comes this opportunity for healing, this opportunity for care for self. And liberation, right? So, now that I am able to identify this need, I can move toward liberation. And she does, literally freeing herself in that way and escaping to freedom. And transformation and possibility, transformation from being within the conditions of slavery and enslavement to being within the conditions of freedom. But that didn't just end there. It continued to actualize and emerge and move forward further in that life forward direction, to the point where she also went back to help to liberate others in this kind of ongoing way. All right, so we'll stop and pause there. They do have like an attunement, a reflective attunement that we kind of move to, but just want to pause. I realized that was a lot, and maybe I was talking quickly there.
Thank you so much, Miko. Thank you. Why don't we just take a minute to take a breath. One of the things that came out in our planning meeting last week was how our project here is characterized by all of these different presentations with the sort of question, what does this mean to you? What does this do? What does this do in you? Miko, that was so rich. Let's just see. That was a big mouthful, right? And there's so much there. Let's just see. What did that do? What did that bring? What's alive for you in what Miko brought us, which is a whole new branch of conceptualizing the article that Miko loves so much, embodying it. Let's see how you're embodying it. So if it seems right to you, Miko, we'll have anyone say whatever is there for them.
I mean, I came on a minute or two late, but I got in the shorter time that I was there, I just feel so full. Oh my goodness. I just feel like I'm embodying Harriet. Oh my God. And it's a constant reminder to me, like, we just don't know the depths of everyone that we see and pass on the street. We just don't know how deep they are and what's going on for them. Thank you.
I just really want to thank Miko for that beautiful presentation. And what's so alive in me just now is inspiration and possibility, and just the hugeness of all of that when we can really take, some of the things that Miko brought out and really feel into that movement forward, not just from the inside individually, but from this space that can evolve around us that includes so many other people and deeper layers of understanding around that. So thank you, Miko. That was beautiful.
Thank you, Miko, for bringing all this richness, and also I feel a sense. I feel like a bud of forsythia right now. So you can see a little bit of the yellow. It's still in the bud, but it's there. And I feel this potential in the way you're framing the work, and it feels so hopeful. And I'm very, I'm very excited about what you presented. So thank you so much. Thank you.
What I feel is a sense of structure that one of the key quotation for me was, I am not against man, but certain structural pattern. And this is what I really, what you fleshed out for me, from my understanding. And because maybe I am reading a book that's Waking Up White and Finding Myself in the Story of Race. And it's a white woman who wrote that book. And it's very complementary to your presentation, because that book tells about how in America, the structural patterns of segregation and the vocabulary escapes me. And now with your presentation gives the processes, how to do it together, and to have a common felt sense and a together felt sense. That when we are in a meeting, to invite the group felt sense instead of one hierarchical figure, he's leading everything. And that's, I felt this movement of horizontal process, much more hope. So I hope I make sense. And Brigitte bowing out.
Really, this was just amazing presentation that just gripped me, because I've never really thought of Jenlin's work in a political context at all. And it brought to mind so much of what's happening right now in the George Floyd kind of movement, the way that's bringing a connection to meaning in the most oppressive kind of situation individually, that's become a completely collective movement. It just, as she was laying out, that these steps are really creating and have carried forward massive change, and continue still to do that through the trial that's been unheard of in the past of this policeman and what happened there. So just the process of the way she connected Jean's work to all of this is just to me, I don't want to be judgmental, but it was like brilliant and very enlightening.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm really glad that I sort of like forced myself to, be able to carve this time, which is really difficult on Monday. I really appreciate the intersectionality of Jean's work and activism and moving forward in a kind of like social justice way. I think that the piece that's alive for me, it's in quoting Resma Menakan, is at its best, activism, it's a form of healing. And it is about what we do and how we show up in the world. It is about learning and expressing regard, compassion, and love. And I think that what was alive for me in that conversation is that in doing this work and getting to a place when you can actually hold someone else with compassion and love, that there's an interaction that develop and move it forward. And from there, that it's not only the internal work or the individual work. In Buddhism, it wouldn't be just sitting in your cushion, but it would really be the practice of engaged Buddhism. I think in this form, it would be the practice of engaged focusing. That focusing is not just for me, but it would be something that would, like a tidal wave, move all of us forward as one unit. Thank you so much. I am going to say, and let it land where it land, that I am so glad to see BIPOC people showing up in this room and taking on a leadership role. So thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I love that tidal wave image.
Yeah, so I know that Harriet Tubman, when she didn't know which direction to take as she was leading people out, would go into a dream, and get an exact image inside her of which direction she should go. That was the safe direction, and that's something that we can do, as well, that we have that if we tune in, that knowledge. And so, yeah. And so what you said, also encourages me to really trust what I see inside me. And somebody in my family who is a year older than me is passing, it sounds like right now. And, and it really encourages me to do what I need to do in my life, in the time that I have. And so thank you, for showing us how to trust what's inside us and lead with other people and join with other people. Thank you.
Ayana, I had thought of that same image from the movie Harriet. I don't know. I mean, just raise your hands if you saw that movie. It would be great to watch it again. But there's that scene where she doesn't take the usual route across the bridge, and her sort of prayer state is the state of like a focusing state, or is a focusing state, where she envisions the right way to go, and it's similar to Dean Genlin's father, who had a felt sense of how to escape from the Nazis in very complex times. And we can think about these things as historic, but also metaphoric, that when we're escaping oppression, we can find the felt sense of the right way to go, or when we're escaping all of the ways that we're caught and trapped and enslaved.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts and your kind words and your feedback. Yeah, I'm just appreciating you all. So for this attunement, I want to invite us all to reflect on and sense into a personal or historical moment of coming into empowered awareness. So we can begin by taking a couple of breaths, coming back into and turning inward toward our bodies. And as we do, I invite us to hold in our awareness the particular intricacies of our individual and collective shaping, our experientially felt body that is embedded within and informed by larger structural patterns and systems. Holding in our awareness the particular intricacies of our histories, our families, our cultures, our identities, our generations, our experiences, the whole of our relational field across time. And within all of that, sensing into that aspect of self that has been present to and aware of all of those experiences. Maybe recognizing the ways the embodied self has changed and evolved over time. Yet aware of this ever-present aspect of self, ground of awareness that has always been. And from this space, inviting into our awareness a moment of realization, of coming into power or possibility, of accessing freedom or uncovering hope. Welcoming a moment that feels distinctly personal and or one that feels collective or historical or that we may have witnessed. And taking some time to sense into the felt quality of that moment. Maybe a word, phrase, gesture, or sound comes to mind. And we might just notice whether it feels possible to cultivate an attitude of curiosity toward whatever comes. And now sensing into the contours of the setting of that moment, the location and landscape, the features, the time of day, the temperature, maybe even the smell. Taking some time to notice a sense of ourselves in relation to that moment. Noticing as well any others who may also be present. And sensing into the atmosphere, the felt quality of being within it, that felt background feeling. And maybe an image comes to mind, or the moment begins to unfold. And there within that, I invite us again to see if it's possible to cultivate an attitude of curiosity toward whatever comes, with whatever's unfolding. And from that place, maybe asking and holding the following questions. What was the felt quality that preceded this moment of realization, of coming into power or possibility, of accessing freedom or uncovering hope? For how long had that particular quality been present? Had it changed over time, been relatively constant? And just noticing what comes. And now I want to invite us to pose and hold the question, what was the felt quality of that shift into realization, into power or possibility, into freedom, into hope? Was there a particular happening or catalyst that seemed to facilitate that shift? Was it momentary or gradual? Just noticing whatever comes there and making note of it if you would like. And lastly, you might now ask and sense into, what was the new understanding that emerged with that shift? At what level of interaction did that shift take place? The intrapersonal, the interpersonal, the collective, two of those, or maybe even all three. You might hold the question, what is it that that shift enabled? Taking a moment to notice what comes with all of that, and maybe making a note of it. And asking inwardly, what was or is the felt sense of what it is that that shift enabled? Noticing if any images, words, phrases, gestures, sounds, or other qualities come. And holding all of that gently in your awareness. And now, taking a deep breath together as we bring this practice to a close. Inviting us maybe to check if there's something we'd like to hold on to or potentially even return to. And maybe making note of what comes there. And then whenever we're ready, inviting us gently, easily to open our eyes, expand our gaze, and return to the room. So I'm sorry if that went a little longer, but.
Thank you so much, Miko. So let's take a deep breath together. Sort of like after a Thanksgiving meal, if you're American and you, but I'm sure every place has those big meals. You have to take a big breath afterwards. Okay, we're ready to hear from you. And again, we always like to give a special invitation to the more reluctant to speak people and the new people. And all the rest of you. I just want to say to Miko, I'm so glad that you can come and experience this community, because what we're doing here is something very dear to your heart, of how focusing organically carries forward with a group, that each person's sharing builds on and thickens the felt sense for the others. And you're getting to be part of that this morning.
Just like to read one of Harriet Tubman's quotes, but thank you, Miko, so much for connecting me and reminding me of it. I had crossed the line, I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in a strange land. It's just really reverberating in the, I guess, in my own sense of all three layers of intrapersonal, collective presence for me here. So thank you.
I'm wondering, and we don't have time really to go into it, but I would love to know more what that means to you, Beth. And I was thinking that focusing is the connection with the whole big everything that does welcome us, even when there's no person to welcome us. There's this kind of inner welcome that comes organically.
Yeah, coincidentally, I was in the dyad with Beth, and she brought that in, and it was a wonderful example of what you were just naming, Lynn, about how right? The movement comes in when we're together. And, you know, what came up with me surprised me. Miko, in the attunement that you led was the experience of being bullied in the schoolyard as a child, whether it was because I was a Jew or just a kind of, you know, kind of late blooming, you know, loud person with a lot to say, who knows? But what was interesting, you know, I was alone in that in a way, but I felt somehow welcomed or somehow supported in, because I was seeing the scene from above with a lot of compassionate awareness. And so maybe something like how the, this may sound sort of mystical, right? The group energy of the being together with allowed me to be in relationship to that constrained place. Anyway, I could say more, but thank you so much, Miko. As a 63-year-old guy who's a healing arts practitioner, and when I was younger, a big-time activist, you know, it's so beautiful to see someone from your generation integrating the healing arts and activism in a way that just was so not the conversation many years ago. Bless you. Bless you.
Yeah, I feel very similarly in that I'm so glad you did what you did. And we're having this conversation. And like 5-6 years ago, I was really, when I was getting my PhD, I was really deep into like genderless theory and realizing the political implications of it that we weren't really taking up. And there didn't seem to be quite a way to, I don't know, I couldn't quite find a way. I mean, I'd like to have a conversation with you later on with how to articulate some of the things in the way that you articulated. So it's really exciting. And especially in terms of like building practices, I was very excited about the possibility of building new practices and words of how to use language in a way that's not just you go from this category, now you're here, but more as it can also be a liberatory practice to use language in this particular way. And the ways that we get together, it's just, I mean, there's more to be said, but thank you. It's wonderful.
I heard Miko's talk as something almost like an executive summary for a textbook. And I could see the power of theory put into concept, sort into practice, sort of like the implicit to the explicit. And I really hope that Miko, that you're able to hear from the things people are saying, how you do speak so well. Or I know you've referred to taking the idea that I don't speak well and doing something with it. And I'm so curious about what's going on in your head about that. I also know that in practice, you deal with abandoned animals, that you work in a shelter setting where you deal with totally inarticulate little goats and farm animals, and that in your day-to-day practice, that you're living out the most elemental level of care and compassion that has no words at all. And at the same time, you're able to deliver to this little group the outline of not just a textbook, but a university curriculum. And how do we take our individual focusing skill into a larger arena and a larger arena and a larger arena, just trusting that somebody will see, oh, you paused, how interesting. Or that somebody would hear you say co-hold, and just take a moment to wonder, what would it be like if we were co-holding this whole concern, whatever it is we're talking about. So I just want to say I'm in awe and appreciation and excitement for what's next.
Thank you, BJ. I had also thought, oh, this should be a course, an 8-week course, so that we can practice with it.
Yeah, me too. Had the same thought.
Oh, you did too, Nancy.
I was already going to talk to Miko after this class about something like that.
I knew you were thinking that, Melinda. My inner Melinda was thinking.
I also was amazed by your talk, Miko. Thank you. I would love some help in knowing how to be a welcoming force to those who awaken to and feel to recognizing what you're speaking of. And I feel so helpless in knowing how to do that, other than when I'm out in the community saying hi and smiling and welcoming people. I mean, that's such a minor, teeny little things. Any ideas on how to be a welcoming force to people as they awaken would be helpful.
You know, Nancy, I just want to say, I don't think that's a tiny thing. I think that our welcoming people and smiling at people and paying attention to people. I'm in New York, so there's lots of opportunities to connect with people. And I think it's very powerful. And it makes, I'm a very shy person. Some of you won't believe that, but I am. and being friendly to people that I don't know is hard for me, but I've gotten into it, and it is so rewarding. I feel so enlivened and enlarged when I am welcoming to people.
My experience is that when I accept all aspects of myself, then I automatically am accepting aspects of other people, and that can be a nonverbal thing even.
Absolutely. I've loved in this session how we've sort of shown the inner and the between is the same. The inner is the between. There's no differentiation since we are interaction. Well, it's just about time to stop, and I asked Miko to read us one more quote. The way Isabel used to read us a poem at the end, and people have, especially Frida, talked about that, how important, and Vivian is nodding, that was to have Isabel read us a poem at the end. So Miko is going to read us a quote to end with, and you can contact Miko. Also, if you would put your comments in the YouTube, that would be so helpful for everything, including helping the channel, the new channel for Help the Helpers, to be extended, and to encourage other people to put their comments in the chat. That, you know, that comment place, you just type it in there. Miko.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure kind of being in conversation and community with you. And I appreciate all of the kind words. And I hope that you all will email me, because I'm excited to, kind of explore this further with you all. But I'll close with the quote that I read from Focusing, Jean's book, Focusing, about the life forward process. I will only read a short part of it. Your body always tends in the direction of feeling better. Your body is a complex life-maintaining system. Often we feel so much wrong that we come to accept those bad feelings as the basic state of things. But it is not. The bad feeling is the body knowing and pushing toward what good would be. Every bad feeling is potential energy toward a more right way of being, if you give it space to move toward its rightness.
Thank you, Miko. This is a time, Miko, when we all say goodbye together. Everybody says anything they want to as we leave each other. And looking forward to seeing you next week, everybody. And
Be well. Yes, be well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Be
you,
well,
Miko.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.